Today, I'd like to take a look at chapter 7 of the Gospel of Matthew and start out with the concept of judging others, which is in verses 1 to 5 of the Gospel of Matthew. One of the lines that sometimes get people upset with the Gospel of Matthew is this line, stop judging that you might not be judged. When people see that line, they're like, that's a tough one. We tend to, as human beings, we tend to a lot of times try to judge other people. It's just something that kind of happens to us naturally. We meet somebody and there might be something about them that we do not like, we're upset with. And so what do? We start to judge them a little bit, and we say certain things about them, and then we wonder a little bit later on, was I a little bit too harsh in my judgments? And so when Jesus says, stop judging that you might not be judged, we're like, I don't know about that one, Jesus. That's a tough one. That's hard for me not to judge other people. It's just something that kind of arises in me naturally, and you know, what's so bad about it? Everybody does it, that type of thing. So what does this really mean, this idea about judging others? What is Jesus getting at? What is he talking about? Is he asking us to do something that is really, in some ways, kind of beyond us, very difficult for us to do? And that would be a natural thought that maybe this is too hard for us. And in a lot of the teachings that Jesus has, we've noticed here in the Sermon on the Mount, chapters 5, 6, and 7 in Matthew, we notice this is challenging stuff. We're told to love our enemies. We're told to be forgiving. We're told not to rely so much on material things God will provide. So these things are hard for us. Is this another one in that category? Well, what this really means is that we can recognize the faults of others. I mean, recognizing the faults of others is something that is going to happen. It's something that is natural. People do have faults. If someone is arrogant, if someone is prideful, if someone utters a mean remark, we're going to recognize that. We're going to be upset by that. That's natural, and Jesus is not talking about not recognizing the faults of others. But the deal is not doing it in an arrogant way. Jesus is saying, no, there are going to be faults that people will have, but don't be arrogant in the way you point those faults out about other people. Because we have to recognize that we also have faults. It's not just that other person who has faults. We too are human beings. We have faults. We do things that are wrong. If other people get mad, sometimes we get mad. If other people are prideful, sometimes we're prideful. If sometimes other people issue a mean remark, sometimes we do that as well. So we have to realize that other people and their faults are not a whole other universe, kind of foreign to us. We're part of that universe too. And so we have to do this in a way that is not arrogant. To stop judging really means to refrain from condemning another person. So recognizing the faults, that's understandable, we can do that, but we don't want to condemn that person, because what about myself? What about my faults? And that's what Jesus is saying in terms of judging. Yes, we can realize, that person, that remark was kind of mean. And Jesus will have a technique that he will bring to us in how to deal with that. And that's part of human life that we've all encountered. We know people like that, and we ourselves, and that's the point Jesus is making, we ourselves can be in that category as well. So the concept here is don't condemn that person. Because when we condemn a person, we kind of are pushing them out of our life instead of taking them into our life. And so we have to understand that we can do those very same faults that that other person is doing. And so we have to work with them and not exclude them, condemn them, talk about how bad they are to other people. No, we want to work with them, get to know them better, get to help them deal with their faults, and maybe when that happens, we can also work on our own faults a little bit and improve and become a better person. And Jesus follows that up by saying, well, for as you judge, so will you be judged. Kind of like in the Our Father. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. So we're asking God for forgiveness depending on our forgiveness. Well, if we want to be judged harshly and cruelly, not given a second chance, not spoken to, exclude, then we're sort of saying to God, well, God, you can do the same thing to me. You know, you can judge me harshly. You can condemn me because I'm condemning all these other people and being harsh to them, and I'm inviting you, God, to do the same to me. And so the concept here is be careful in terms of condemning other people. And so Jesus says, for, as you measure, with which you measure will be measured out to you. So if you measure out harshness to other people, Jesus is saying, well, you're going to get a whole lot of harshness yourself. So be careful here in terms of the way you measure your remarks, the way you measure your attitude towards other people. Be careful in terms of that measurement. It's very interesting, this whole concept of measurement in the scriptures. If we look at it in, for example, Luke chapter 6, verse 38, the measure is not so much one of judgment, but the measure of generous giving. So when Jesus is talking about measure, he's not trying to get you to measure a judgment. What he's trying to get you to do is to be generous in your measure, to give above, to give more. Just like when people are measuring to us, it's always nice if we get more. It's like when you go to the store and you order that ice cream cone or that cup of ice cream, and the person who's waiting on you, puts in a little bit more, and you're like, oh, that's nice. I thought I was going to get less. I get more. We feel good. And so the measure with which we measure, the measure of our remarks, the measure of our attitude, the measure of our conduct, the measure of our love, to be more generous in our measure is what Jesus is promoting here. So in terms of judgment, hold it back a little bit. Be careful in what you measure. Another scripture from the Hebrew scripture that points this out is the Book of Wisdom. A great book of wisdom, really tremendous teachings. Chapter 12, verses 22, it says, us therefore you chastise, and our enemies with 1,000 blows you punish, that we may think earnestly of your goodness when we judge, and when being judged we may look for mercy. So when we're chastised, and when our enemies are punished, well, what are we reminded of? Well, that when we judge, we can think of God's goodness. So that moment when you're prone to make that judgment, to utter that remark, And let's face it, we're all going to have those moments. The antidote there is to think of what? To think of the generosity of God and to call upon that generosity so that we may be very generous in what we share in terms of our remarks and our judgments about other people. And so when it comes time for us to being judged, we can think of God's mercy. So if we can be merciful in our encounters with other people, we can call upon God for God's mercy. Really, when you think about it, a very beautiful teaching.